Well, you know, the boy that came to the hospital at the end there, can you guess what kind of work his dad did?
Surgeon.
But the man in the car with the boy?
Minister.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a deacon.
He was talking on the phone, yeah, get the deacons to do that and all that. Minister. And did he help the guy?
Didn't he talk about pre-op?
Yeah.
He did at the very beginning.
Anyway, I thought he was a preacher myself. But.
He said youth group.
So let's look at the Bible, Luke chapter 10, beginning verse 25. You all probably figured out which parable this is, and there is an outline sitting next to you there in the chairs. And we will take a look at the parable of the Samaritan. These are the parables we've been looking at in these classes starting last Wednesday. We did the parable of the hidden treasure, and now this is the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so, what's your impression, your thoughts about the modern day application, modern day parable as shown in the video, and then the story that we read in the Bible about the Good Samaritan? What's your thoughts? Anything come to mind? And let's look at the overall picture. What's the overall picture drawn here? Just if you put it in a...
You should always take time to help those in need.
Okay. So what's the picture, and that's the application, we're going to get to that. What's the picture that's drawn by Jesus in these words and even the video right there?
Someone that's a usual reject or thought lowly of is the one that responded to help.
Mm-hmm. Everybody looked at that guy funny because of his nationality, which is what the Samaritan was.
Yeah. So you have a guy that's hurt, and you have people, I mean, he's in need, he needs somebody to help him, and then you've got people that just pass by and don't help. But then there's somebody that does help. Yes.
I still think the dad is the doctor. He's the one who could most help.
Right.
But he made a diagnosis without even an examination.
Yeah.
And then the other one, I think, was the youth minister, and he showed some concern.
Yeah, the young man that, among the boys, yeah, okay. Minister.
He showed some concern, but he didn't press.
Not enough.
Yeah. He didn't really help, but he did show concern.
My impression was that he gave money as a minister for the youth group pastor because he did a good job. Because he's like, yeah, take some money. You
Buy
use
him breakfast.
So that's why I thought he's a minister. As his.
Minister, doctor, maybe both, who knows? I don't know.
He was both.
Chapter 10.
I thought it's pretty typical too, though. I mean, it's you know, we see someone that needs help, and we think, I don't really want to get involved. I'm busy. Somebody else will help him.
Yeah.
It's more qualified than I am.
Or he's not deserving of help because of fill in the blank. Like you said, he
Well,
was drunk.
they made a quick judgment saying he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
So.
Luke 10, verse 25. On occasion, and this is Jesus' story, on one occasion an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? Jesus replied, how do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Verse 28. Jesus said, you've answered well. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and when he fell into the hands of robbers, they stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him, went down to him, and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he went out, took out 2 silver coins, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. I'm not going to read the rest. There's an application there. Well, let's talk about the setting here, stepping aside from the modern video that we saw just a minute ago. And let's talk about this road from Jerusalem down to Jericho. It was a 17-mile road. It was known as the Pass of Adumim, and that's referenced over in Joshua chapter 15 and verse 7. It was a common place or common trail that people would go down, 17 miles, but that 17 miles was a steep drop of over 3,000 feet. Imagine some of our roads today that they go down real quickly, winding road down the mountain, But you're walking this now, and along the way, there were caves, there were winding paths, there were robbers that would hide out in the caves. You would not want to travel this road alone, and from the way Jesus tells the parable, it appears that this man did what he shouldn't have done. He should have known better, right? Don't travel alone. So that's why he created his own problem, right? I'm just being sarcastic. But here he is. He's going down this road. It's rocky, it's windy, there's caves, there's thieves. And then, well, maybe a priest or a Levite wouldn't necessarily be going down that road, but that's the way Jesus chose to draw up the story, as he's telling a fictitious story, parable. And there's a priest and a Levite, they go by. And the priest and the Levite really kind of give us, as we've already indicated here, sort of the form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof, as Paul would say in the Timothy letter. And so they have the trappings of being people who should be concerned. They are religious people, but they're just too busy being religious. And someone else, as George pointed out, someone else is going to help them. This guy that's on the road here, beat up. And, for a Levite, think of it this way. A Levite touching a bloody man, now he's unclean, right? Can't go serve it. So that's not my job. If there's blood in it, I don't want to be there. Levite doesn't help. Priest doesn't help. And so, let's just put it this way. And sometimes we don't like to hear this. Their religion didn't do them any good, did it? And I suppose there's probably been moments in our own lives where because we were too busy, or whatever the case may be, maybe our religion didn't really serve a purpose at one moment either. And as I said before, the story with the guy that's in the car, the man, he says, well, he's a drunk, and maybe he deserves this. He created his own problem. Why was he out this late at night by himself, in a dark alley or whatever? All these things you come up with and say, it's the person's fault. These homeless people out here, they're homeless because what?
Their fault.
Because they didn't get a job, and they didn't do this, and they didn't do that. So they deserve it. It's their fault, right? What do you think so far? I've kind of thrown out a few things here and there.
Even if it is their fault, it doesn't take away your compassion. It shouldn't.
We're still human beings.
Yeah. Even if people made stupid decisions that led them into a problem, do we just say, well, now you made your bed, lie in it, right? That's not the Christian attitude. We should have compassion. We use this word compassion. What do we mean by compassion?
You empathize, you feel for them. You
Okay.
feel their pain.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah. I like the fact that in that word compassion, the word passion is there. Should we feel passionate about other people's needs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can draw out some other things. Let's talk about the Samaritan for a minute. Now, anyone want to, maybe you've talked about this before in other classes, Jesus puts a Samaritan in the picture. And it's funny because if you really look at the culture of that day, this would be an oxymoron to put the word good and Samaritan in the same word. A good Samaritan. In the eyes of a Jew, there's no good Samaritan, right? I don't care who they are. So why was there this rift between Jews, whom we assume are the other characters in the story, and now this Samaritan that helps out, presumably, this man who's in need, who's not a Samaritan, another Jew. So what's the rift between Samaritans and Jews?
They hated each other.
Any idea why? Yes.
The Jews thought themselves to be pure, and they thought the Samaritans were mixed with other races,
Half-breeds.
other nations.
A few hundred years before this, Babylonians came in, conquered the territory. Jews went back to their homeland. Some Jews stayed there, intermarried with half-breeds now, intermarried with people who were not Jews, took on their religion, their gods, married their women. So these were not legitimate people, Samaritans, in the eyes of Jews. Okay, they were just kind of rejects. And so, as tradition would say, a Jew religiously would get up every morning and thank God and then pray throughout the day. And they would say Samaritans didn't begin their day with prayer. And they would, a Jew, as you see in the story or the actual event that happened in John chapter 4, a Jew would normally go around Samaria if they were traveling that area, but in John 4:4 it says that Jesus needed to go through Samaria because there was a woman there, a Samaritan woman, who needed water that would spring up into everlasting life. But Jews would always go around Samaria. For a Jew, as pointed out in John chapter 4, a Jew would, the Samaritan woman asked Jesus, where's the right place we ought to worship? And Samaritans would worship at Mount Gerizim, and they would go and honor Jacob's well. That was in John 4. But Jews, of course, would go to Jerusalem and worship, and they didn't have the same respect that Samaritan did for Jacob's well. All right? So, why would Jesus use the Samaritan then? Reasons are obvious, right?
I think I know why.
Completely culturally different people, yes.
In verse 27, we see that the lawyer goes through some self-justifications. And I don't think Jesus believed him. And that's why the story of the Good Samaritan, because he didn't believe the lawyer.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, let's go down to point number 2 on your outline. Let's talk about the purpose of the parable. So the setting, of course, is that something happens before the story of the parable, which I just read a while ago. And so what's the setting here? What prompts Jesus to tell this story about this parable about a Samaritan and a Jew?
God wants to know who his neighbor is.
Yeah. Jesus, I want you to tell me what's the ultimate thing I ought to do in life. And, and he even answers, he says, well, I think you ought to love your neighbor, or love God with all your heart, soul, mind, love your neighbor as yourself. And so the question comes, who's my neighbor? Who's your neighbor? You know what the word neighbor means, by the way? It comes from the idea of one who is nigh or nearby, a neighbor. Anybody, whoever's nearby, whoever is in your circle of influence, whoever you come into contact with, whoever, doesn't matter what race they are, doesn't matter what income level they're at, anyone nearby is your neighbor. And so that's what prompts Jesus to tell the story.
I imagine this guy had an idea of who his neighbor was, and it wasn't anything like what Jesus told.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of the same way. We've got an idea, if we see one of our friends or neighbors or someone hurt, sure, we stop and help them. If you don't know them, it's easier to go around them.
Yeah. You don't enter into their world and their hurt and their needs, and it's just somebody that's a statistic out there, right? They're not even on your radar. And Jesus could have very well theologically answered this guy and just said, anyone's your neighbor, anybody who's nearby. But he chose to tell a story about even a Samaritan is your neighbor. I want you to look at, let's see if I can do this here. Look at verse 29 for just a minute. So, listen to, this is the attitude of this man in verse 29. He wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who's my neighbor? So what's his motive behind asking Jesus, how do I get eternal life? I want you to pat me on the back, Jesus, and tell me I'm a good guy.
You already knew the answer.
But he says, how do I justify myself?
Yeah.
And that's contrary to the reason Jesus came.
Okay. See, did I put this on the outline? I didn't put this on. Go down to verse 36 after the telling of the parable. In verse 36, now this is the application, we're getting ahead of a little bit here, but verse 36, Jesus says, which of these three, that would be the Levite, the priest, or a man
Good Samaritan.
the Good Samaritan. I don't know why I drew a blank there. Anyway, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? Now watch this, verse 37. The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. So, and I know there's the rest of the verse there, but listen to what he says. What's his response? He didn't even say the Samaritan. He said the one. He couldn't even get that word out of his mouth. And he didn't want to say that word. That's how much they detested Samaritans. He just said, well, the one who showed mercy, not the Samaritan who showed mercy. Now, who is my neighbor? That's an interesting question. How about, I think Jesus answered it this way. Who am I a neighbor to? That's really what we're talking about here. Who do I choose to look and see someone who has need and then move beyond a feeling of compassion and actually show compassion by helping them? Who am I a neighbor to? Go and show mercy, Jesus said. Do what the Samaritan did. Be a neighbor. Don't worry about who's out there as my neighbor. No, I need to be a neighbor to anyone that comes across my path. Okay, let's go down to the application. Really, the main lesson is, am I a neighbor? But you tell me some of the secondary lessons that we can learn from this. Some other lessons. We kind of touched on a few of them already, but you might want to repeat them anyway. What are some other lessons?
We need to be looking,
Need to be looking.
because some people just overlooked him, crumpled up on the ground, they didn't even acknowledge him.
You ever pull up to an intersection where the person's got the sign there, you know what I mean? And you don't even want to look, right? You don't want to connect eyeballs with them, so you're just looking down at your radio, fumbling around, so you don't have to even look at the person. Don't even want to look at it. Are you looking for someone to help? Yeah.
Well, there was also a whole lot of judgment going on in that video.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at the taxi cab driver, and he happened to be reading a newspaper that was Middle Eastern.
In Arabic.
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that. Yeah.
He was, poorest looking, and the security guard at the hospital.
I saw that. Yeah, give him the eyes, man.
Giving him the eye,
In the hospital, that security guard.
And even the father in the car, well, he's probably drunk. Everybody was making judgments based upon what they saw.
Outward appearance, yeah. Good point. Let me throw in another couple lessons, I think. Religion is more than worship. It's more than a Bible study. It's more than what we do in this building. Religion is what did James said. The true religion is what? To help the widows and the orphans, to help people in need, to help Samaritans in need, to help people out on the street here who are in need. That's real religion. Not just what we're doing. I'm glad you're all here. This is a good thing we're doing here tonight. Bible study, worship, those are good things. Prayers, singing. Okay. You're going to carry your religion outside this building with you and apply it in every aspect of life, even helping people who aren't like you, who aren't the same color, who don't have the nice clothes that you have. I've said this before, compassion is more than a feeling, more than feeling sorry for someone. Maybe we need to also stop making excuses for not helping people in need. How about that? Am I stepping on any toes today? If I am, your feet are in the wrong place. Deborah?
I just wanted to say compassion is an action.
Right. Compaction, right? Action.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, right.
But Jesus didn't, I don't think that he stopped with just be compassionate. The Samaritan paid
Yeah,
money.
above and
He
beyond.
was compassionate and beyond, and I think that we think if we do a little bit, that's good enough, instead of going
Now you're
beyond.
stabbing me. You know, in my life, I'm sorry to say, the only time I go the extra mile is when I passed up the exit I was supposed to go down. You know what I mean? That's the only time I go the extra mile. Gotta go the extra mile.
I like the story of the virgins with the lanterns and their oil, and like how the ones that weren't ready, they didn't have the oil, they weren't prepared. And sometimes it speaks about how we should be prepared at all time, because the moment's gonna come up and you have no oil in your lantern. You know, and it's like we should be ready to do what we have to do at whatever moment.
Bill.
Well, away from the video and back onto the Bible, you know, it was the priest and the Levite that passed him by. And that kind of brings to mind the passage that faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
You know, they were the religious ones and they walked past it.
Yeah. I do a lot of studying, and I read the scriptures, and I look at commentaries, and theology, and you know, I have to say to myself that in my case, that well, the lawyer, he wanted to justify himself by theology, not by practicality. How does it play out in my life? Not just what's the theology I have, what's the doctrine I've learned in Scripture, and those are good things, but it needs to play out in real life. Any other thoughts before we close tonight? Mike, and then after that, Eddie.
I have a half a thought, and I'm not really sure how it is. But the Samaritan, as you brought up, was despised by the Jews and everything, and yet he helped someone who wouldn't give him the time of day. So I mean, we need to care for those that might not like us.
Yeah, think of it this way. The Samaritan that helped the guy that would advantage him up and everything, helped him when he was in need, would that Jew maybe have returned the favor? Maybe not.
Probably not.
Unless he just felt like, well, this guy did such a nice thing for me, I'll return it. But under normal circumstances, the Jew would have never wanted to do anything for a Samaritan.
Or he might have considered giving this particular Samaritan at the time of day, but any other Samaritan, it'd be the same thing, you know, so.
Eddie, and then after that, Sam.
Yeah, I forgot who somebody mentioned putting yourself in their shoes, right? And like Dale was mentioning that there was a lot of prejudging going on. You know, maybe the person was an alcoholic or a drug addict. And to tie in with putting yourself in their shoes, another thing that came to mind was that there have been some of us in the congregation, right? Not just here, but in the body of Christ in general, that have struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction, right? And somebody came to us and told us about the gospel and right, planted those seeds of salvation. And now that we're here, we also tend to forget where we came from. And you know, going along with putting yourself in their shoes, well, some of us might have been in those shoes in the past, right? And we neglect to help those that are struggling in a way that maybe perhaps we struggled with in the past.
Thank you, Sam.
Bear with me for just a moment. Sure. I'm trying to put my thoughts together here, but if and when Jesus was standing before God and God was going to send him to earth, if Jesus would have said, God, if I go down there and I save 10 people, how many likes do I get on my Facebook page? Why would that even matter? Why does it matter if you help a little or help a lot? God didn't come, or Jesus didn't come down here to save all those in Facebook and not those on Instagram.
I jotted this little note down here. I was reading this commentary. It said, well, why did Jesus bring to the story the Levite and the priest? Was it not to rebuke an unreal, uncompassionate, formal religion and reveal in the Samaritan the real spirit of religion? Well, we unfortunately are out of time, so we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to our video audience.